G'day guys, welcome back to the channel. Eno here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. No team update, but one of the new rules, looking at it more in depth, and that is the DPP or dual position players coming into SuperCoach. It's not something that personally I've been across. I know I was obviously aware of it, as many of us probably are that may dabble in, AFL fantasy and the like, but yeah, I mean, I think I made an AFL fantasy team last year and didn't look at it after round 3. So haven't really experienced the DPP too much. Obviously, we all know what it is, but it does change the tactics a little bit. I think when I first saw that it was coming to SuperCoach, I started jumping around thinking there could be all these players coming in. But whilst quite a few players do gain it throughout the year, there really is only a few relevant, and that's what I sort of dived into the last couple of days, looking at how many players actually became relevant once gaining DPP and how many would have actually been a good selection. I'm just looking at the past 4 years. Obviously, you can go deeper than that. And, of course, the last 2 have been sort of COVID affected. But anyway, we'll get into it and we'll look at, firstly, if you're just not aware of what DPP is or what exactly the rules are, I'll just go over them quickly again. So at certain intervals throughout the season, players will be reviewed as to where they play, and at the completion for fantasy, it was before round 6, so at the completion round 5. But I sort of looked into it as the completion around 6, 12, and 18 for SuperCoach is how it's sort of worded in the rule. So still not 100% sure what it's going to be, but it's either one of those two. And only a single position player can be awarded DPP throughout the season. If you're already a dual position, you can't lose it, but you also can't get a third either. So basically, it's for the single defense, mid, forward, or ruck, and gain a secondary one at those certain intervals. So yeah, there's no defense, mid, forward, or you can't lose it either once you do have it. So if you go into the year as a DPP, you're just that for the whole season. So yeah, and down the bottom there, I've got how they actually configure or come up to these decisions, and it's not just center bounces, it's actually all stoppages around the ground, which is obviously a thing we don't really have access to, but yeah, you need to play 35% to actually be deemed in that threshold to get the DPP. So anyway, we'll now actually look at some reasons as to why a DPP player might get the position, but what we're actually looking for, and obviously it's players out of position, but it's, are they actually going to fit into that line and, the top 6 or 8, are they actually going to be relevant, or is it just someone that, might get DPP is just going to be completely useless to us anyway? And often it's going to be mids. Sometimes there's a few instances of rucks, but mostly mids either becoming forward or defense, dual position to obviously help those lines that do score a bit less as a whole. So anyway, let's get into it. We've got first here on this page, we've got 2018 and 2019. I've just looked at round 6 in this video. I haven't gone further on because most of the additions are in the round 6 bracket. You could probably find a couple of diamonds in the rough later on, but round 6 is going to be really where it's all going to matter. And in 2018, 6 players actually gained, and I've actually just looked at forward today as well. Midfield's the only one here that got defense, but most of it's really going to be forward relevant. We do have already a really good batch of players to pick in defense. Midfield, obviously, it's irrelevant. Rucks are the rucks, but it's pretty much going to be the forward line. But in 2018, Whitfield started as a mid only. He played majority down back at the start, and at about round 5 or 6, he moved up onto the wing and had a good patch there before actually going back to defense later in the year. But he averaged 94 up until the point of when the DPPs were added, and then after that, he actually averaged 101 for the rest of the year. So he would have been a successful pickup if you did at that point pick him up in defense and had him for the rest of the year. The other 2 I got there that were somewhat relevant, but sort of didn't quite reach what they probably would need to be relevant is Zeeble and Rockcliffe. Zeeble started as a mid only as well. He played a bit of mid forward, kicked a few goals early, but he still spent majority of the year down as a forward and sort of tailed off and only averaged 80 after gaining the DPP. So he would not have been someone you would have brought in, or if you did, wouldn't have been very successful. And Rockcliffe was another one that year. The others were like Lockie Fogarty and just a couple of pretty irrelevant players. But Rockcliffe somewhat was. He was obviously a big scorer back in the day, but this particular season he was spending a lot of time forward, averaged 54, missed a few games due to injury, came back, still was playing forward, but he actually did play midfield for the back sort of half of the year or back third and average about 84, 82. But yeah, again, he wouldn't have been very successful. 2019 was a little bit different. There was actually a couple of successful guys. First one was Ed Kerno. He started with mid only and gained the forward at about, around 5 or 6. He still was a bit playing forward for the next 4 or 5 rounds, so it wasn't great until about round 11. He started to tag a bit in the middle, and then other games he wasn't tagging, just played purely in the middle. And post round 11 he actually averaged 105 for the rest of the season. But post round 13, after he stopped tagging, he actually went 107, 111, 117, 116, 80, 94, 148, 125, and 126 to round the year off, and averaged 113 over the last 9. So if you did trade him in the back half of that year in fantasy, you probably did well. But if it was a SuperCoach year and say we had it back then, he would have been a really great pickup in the forward line. Next is Gaz. This is obviously at Geelong. He started the year as a mid-only in SuperCoach, but he spent a bit of time forward, and he mainly did spend most of his time forward this year. Got the DPP, but he was a bit of an up and down pick. Had his games, with great highs of 148, 130, and 167, but a lot of lows in the 60s and 50s that really ultimately ended up him averaging about 98 after getting the DPP, which I've put as a cross here. It's actually decent in any other year, but he missed a game due to suspension. And he also just was so up and down. You probably would have traded him out because there was a run of about 60, 50, 68, something like that. And he did get that 167 I mentioned very late in the season. And obviously that props up the average, but he would have been a pretty disappointing selection, I would have thought. And it was a good year for forwards off the top of my head. I had, there was Rowan, Dunkley, Boak, Heaney, Tim Kelly, that sort of crop there it was. And they were all very, very good as far as average goes. So he wouldn't have been, he would have been an okay pick, put it that way. But the next guy, Dusty, would have been actually a pretty good pick. He caught some early tags this season, spent some time forward, and at about the DPP rollouts, he was averaging 87. From that point on, he scored 9 SuperCoach tons and averaged 104 for the rest of the season. So he would have been a great pickup for you. Did miss a game, as he generally doesn't until recently. But yeah, that season he would have worked. So that's the first 2 years I've looked at. We'll move on to 2020, which obviously was the COVID season, and scoring is always a little bit off, in my opinion, looking back there, but still side bottom. I mean, there was 8 additions at round 6, and really only one guy worked. And side bottom I've got here just because he had really good numbers, averaged 109 after 4 rounds and was playing enough to gain the forward status, but he broke those health and safety protocols at the time, copped a 4-match ban. He came back, actually scored well over another 5-game patch and averaged like 120. And then in about round 13 or something, he went home to, I think he was having a kid, and he didn't manage to get back into the hub because of, borders and whatnot. So he might have probably been a good pick. It was a short season, so maybe that 5-week patch of giving you 120 would have been, pretty good for you, but you would have had to trade him out once again when he went home. But Libba was the one. He didn't come in until round 3. There's only 3 rounds there that he spent a bit of time forward to get the eligibility, and then played midfield for the rest of the season pretty much, and averaged 112, and actually pulled off a 196 in the last round, which would have been very, very big for you. So he would have been a good pickup, a very good pickup that season. But as we can see, there's not very many, and last year was sort of out of the blue. We had some unbelievable additions. In round 6, there was 21 forward additions, but really only about 3 sort of relevant. I've got a couple other guys down there, but first was Fife. He came off in round 2 with a concussion, got subbed out on about 90. Back in round 4 after he missed the week, continued his good start to the season. He was averaging about at 115, and he copped a shoulder injury not long after. He returned from it, scored very poorly, injured it once again, and then was out for the rest of the season and opted for surgery. So there was actually a patch there where he would have scored well for you as a forward, but ultimately, again, like side bottom, would have cost you another trade to get rid of. So I've got a cross there as not successful. Josh Kelly, if you're watching JD, I'm sorry, but this would have been an unbelievable one to get last year. Shoved forward by Leon for the first 6 or so rounds. Unleashed into the midfield. I think he had a couple of good scores before he was fully back in the midfield, but averaged about 111 after gaining the DPP. But did actually miss round 21 with a slight ankle. I was an owner as a midfielder, but yeah, as a forward, it would have been a great selection. Even with that missed game, he averaged about 110 it was after getting DPP. So that would have been a very good one. I've actually got it in the wrong order here, but geez, Sean Darcy is the one there that we all look at and just go, wow, imagine having this last year as a forward. Because he is more of a SuperCoach guy than a fantasy guy. Obviously, he probably was very highly owned in the forward line last year in fantasy, but this one was just ridiculous. He came in at round 2. Darcy had that knee injury early. And when he came in, Meek was still playing, Lloyd Meek, for about 3 more rounds. And so they obviously sharing the ruck time, and it gave Darcy enough forward time to play down there and get the DPP as a forward ruck. And then Meek went out of the side. He soloed ruck for about till round 19, I think it was, which is, another 15 rounds on his own. He averaged about 120 for the rest of the season. I've actually got 129 after the DPP there. But yeah, he finished the season as a 118 average. He had stupid highs of 146, 140, 193, 183, 156, and a 150. Imagine copping those in your forward line, and just something ridiculous that we've never seen before. I'm thinking Dunkley 2019 is the last one that was doing stuff like that. Would have been unbelievable. But yeah, so it's probably not something we can expect to see again. It's a bit of a rare case that he was, sharing time. But yeah, 2 other guys I got there, Hunter and English. They were okay. They average around 90 after getting the DPP, but they're probably about 5 or 6 points per game off, you would say, than they what's required to be a good selection. So I've looked at a few there. My final thoughts on what possible players could gain it in 2022. It's hard to predict. People have been saying your Bonds, your Petrakas. It's not something we can really predict too often. Five's probably enough. Five and Danger are the main 2, I would say, as everyone has, that you would think. But we don't know where they're going to play majority yet. Penderbury, and possibly off a halfback flank, he gets it. But is that even going to be enough to be, top 6 to 8 and someone we would even pick? McInerney's an interesting one, with Hipwood out for the start of the season. Do they play the dual rucks with Darcy Fort they've picked up? And, does that give him enough forward time, like a Darcy last year, to get a forward ruck? That would be very, very interesting. Kelly I've got here again as a bit of a troll, but who knows what's going to happen at GWS. And, there's Taranto who's already got the forward eligibility. So, maybe Kelly gets it again. Who knows? And then I've got Lockie Hunter again. He's probably not a good scorer or good enough anymore. He has had a couple of good seasons, but Bailey Smith's another one I've got there. Just, that's just some Bevo things. We don't know what could happen with how many players, midfielders they've got. But there really isn't any others as I was scrolling through that I could think of. There's going to obviously be ones that come out of the blue, but for any of them to be actually relevant, I just don't really see it. There's probably going to be 1 or 2, but yeah, my final thoughts really is not to overreact to this. We saw, DPPs and SuperCoach. We got to, go Dunkley and no one else because there's going to get all these forwards. I just don't see it happening as much as it did, with those amazing options or 2 amazing options last year. I can't envision something like that happening again. There will be a couple of options, but I just don't think they're going to be right at the top echelon like those guys were last year. Let me know your thoughts. As always, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Give me a follow on Twitter at NOFTTV and the Fantasy Take TV account. Always posting some stuff there and some thoughts for the rest of the preseason. So, yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. And thanks for watching.